All right, and we're live. Hello, everybody. This is episode 6, I think. I'll put in the description, but I have Jerry here, known as Wyrmwalk in terms of Instagram and basically his like artist persona. Correct me if wrong there.
That's
But
right.
yeah, thank you for joining today.
Anytime.
So, a little bit about Jerry from what I've gathered. He's worked with bands like Frozen Soul, Fulci, Fluids, Iron Age, Undeath, Abraded, Ninth Realm, and Plague Years, among many others. But I've
Hmm.
been a fan of his work for quite some time. Definitely
Thank
interested
you.
to learn more about his process. And he just has an awesome painterly and kind of like fantastical style that's like really refined, and I really dig it. So thanks
Thank
for
you. I
joining me,
appreciate
man.
that. I'm not very good at accepting compliments, so I'm working on that. So thank you.
Yeah, not many artists are. I've gathered.
Yeah, all right. Because everything we think everything we do is terrible.
Yeah, I
So
know.
it's like, but I'm working on it. I'm getting there.
I'll lay off the flattery from here on out, or at least until we go till the end. I'll try my best.
Sounds good.
But yeah, we were talking a little bit in the dugout. So you're in Philly, I'm in
Yep.
Atlanta, and you were here not that long ago, right?
It was before the plague, so whenever that was, it must have been. Actually, you know what? As you get older, maybe it was like 10 years ago. It may have been that long ago. Ooh.
Yeah, time
Um,
just flies,
it really
especially
does,
since
man.
the pandemic. For me, it's just been a giant blur.
That's a fact. That's a fact. So yeah, I've been to Atlanta a few times. Yeah, it's very nice down there. But I like the cold weather a little bit more.
It's pretty dang cold here today for some
It's,
reason. It's like
it's
sunny
my
and looks
bad.
great.
Yeah.
But you were telling me that earlier you were playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like, how long
Yep.
have you been playing that?
Well, since I was about 9 or 10 years old, so I'm 40 now. So it's been a long time. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since second edition in the early 1990s. So it's a big part of who I am. I think anyone who's not even if you're as old as me, but especially if you're as old as me, and being into art, just staring at the monster manual, looking at Brahms' art for a lot of the stuff that he was doing back then. I mean, it's a huge influence. But I also like to play it too. So I'm an old nerd. That's how it goes. Yeah.
So, like, what's the best part about playing the game? Like, what does it kind of feel like? Because I've actually never personally played. I've just
Oh,
had some friends.
yeah. I think it's a lot of it, and I think it changes depending on your age. When I was young, it's Friday night, hanging out with a couple friends, Domino's pizza, being stupid, and that kind of thing, and as
Yeah,
you get older, what you get out of it changes. But now I have a really good group of friends that I play with. We've been playing together for quite a number of years now. We all have, we don't take it too seriously. We play for like 3, 4, 5 hours, and I think the majority of it is just jokes and BSing. Most of them are married and have kids, so we're on the same wavelength of life and that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of fun. You have to find a good group because I played with some people that have made it very unenjoyable. So it's just rolling some dice, having fun. That's keeping your mind off of work for a little bit, and that's what it's always been for me.
nice. And the folks who it isn't fun to play with, is it mostly because they take it too seriously, or?
Yeah. It could be a combination of things. They take it too seriously. Sometimes they have very inappropriate ways of doing things, being either sexist or bigoted or something like that. And again, I don't have a lot of time on my hands, so I don't have, if I'm going to spend the time to play something like this, and again, not be working, not, being with my family, I don't have time to be miserable. So, that's a lesson for you young folk. Don't waste your time on being miserable. Just do things that make you happy, and then move on. You know.
Yeah, totally, man.
Mhm.
So when you're growing up, Dungeons and Dragons like kind of came into your art career. It sounds like too. Were there any
Mhm.
like other early influences that stick out to you?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, sure, you had. It's not just Dungeons and Dragons. Again, scaling it back to like 91. A lot of comic books. I've been a comic book fan, read weekly comics for again 30 years now. So I was starting to read comics around the time of like Image being formed.
Mm-hmm.
So all the best artists, Tom McFarlane, Jim Lee, Portico, Dean Keown, they all went to Image. Didn't exactly make the best product, but artistically it was amazing. So a lot of comics around that time. Huge comic fan. I played a lot of another game called BattleTech. They had amazing art. Mutant Chronicles had amazing art. So a lot of the tabletop games just had some of the most amazing, amazing art. And what kind of actually sucked, but also kind of good about it, was I didn't grow up in Philadelphia, the city. I grew up kind of in the farmlands outside of Philly. So there weren't a lot of people. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I lived in a neighborhood. I didn't live in Stranger Things. There wasn't like a whole group of people. There's very few. And unless that group of friends you had wanted to play it, you were just stuck staring at it. And a lot of times that's what I did. I had all the stuff. I wanted to play it and no one to play it with. It makes it sound like I'm sad. I'm not. But you would just stare at the art, and the art was so amazing. So like, yeah, a lot of tabletop gaming, fantasy art, comics, and album covers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just I mean, I always start whenever we talk about like the best album covers ever made, artistic wise. I always say number one, because the list will always change, but number one will always be Sepultura's Arise
Oh,
by
hell yeah.
Michael Whelan. I bought that album purely on the cover. I love the music; it's one of my favorite albums. But I mean, I don't know how many times just being in my mom's house, listening to that album, just staring at that cover, and the power that album art could have, and really enhance the sound and the music and the entire experience. Yeah, it's life changing, that stuff. So just a lot of, as you can tell behind me, just a lot of nerd stuff. It's everywhere.
Totally. So it looks like you collect some stuff. Is there like
Yeah.
a particular? So I
I like
collect
stuff.
CDs and like art books.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I got some back there. Yeah, there.
What kind of stuff do you collect typically?
Oh boy. Well, what's actually kind of cool now is my daughter is 12 years old, and she's caught the nerd bug. So we go toy shopping.
Nice.
We go to collectible stores, and actually just last weekend in New Jersey, there's a really big horror con. We went to that, and that was really cool. So I mean, I've got some pops, and you can't see it now, but I have all kinds of toys pinned up on the wall. I like stuff. I like really nerdy things. And it angers my wife to no end, but
Dude, I can
it's just
agree
what she
there.
accepts. Yeah, she's actually happy now that my daughter and my son, who's a little bit younger, likes going to these stores, because she's put in a lot of time hanging out in these stores and just wanting to leave. And now I have my little minions that can come with me, and we have a blast. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah, yeah.
Are you looking for mostly like vintage toys, or what's kind of like your grail items at this point?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I try to stay away from the vintage toys because I had a lot of them as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Those that follow me, I'm a huge He-Man fan. So like all the Mondo He-Mans that come out that are making me go broke. Uh, I can find like the old He-Man, but like I have them at my parents' house. Now they're not in the package because I played with them as a kid. So it feels weird to me to like spend a lot of money on something that was like, dude, I had this, you know?
Right.
So I really don't gravitate towards the vintage toys particularly. I like the newer things because I never had them, because they're new. And a lot of stuff from like I noticed like a lot of stuff from the 90s I kind of gravitate towards, because that's when I was in my teenage years where you're not worried about toys anymore. Um, but like, wow, there's some really cool things that I could have gotten. I mean, just as an example, next to me, I'm a huge Full Moon movies person. So people that know, this is Six Shooter from Puppet Master 2 or 3. I think it's the second one. This came out in like the 90s. I took it out of the package. I don't care. And I just absolutely love it.
That's
It's not
awesome,
really
man. Yeah, I like
old,
that guy.
you know what I mean? But it's like, yeah, it's I find it cool, and it makes me happy when I'm really pissed off and I'm doing something here at my desk. I can look at it and it makes me smile. I don't know. So yeah, mostly new stuff, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, neat. I got a very, very tiny collection of like some Godzilla figures, and then some Super 7, of like the heavy
Sure.
metal icons.
Yeah.
I think those paintings on the back car. I think they were done by James Edmondson, but he did a really good job
Really?
with portraits. Or it actually might have been there might have been some by I'm blanking on the name, famous metal artist who did like the Massacre cover and Leprosy. I'm
Oh,
blanking. Somebody will correct me in the
yeah,
comments, but I think he
I'm
might
sure.
have done some too. But it's that kind of style where there's definitely a lot of realism in it, but
Yeah.
it's exaggerated and makes me want to buy it, so it's good.
I have a Super 7 has this is going to get really into nerd talk right now, isn't it? Right.
Hey,
But
go for it, man. That's what you're here for.
yeah, actually I think the two Conans I have back there are the new Super 7 Conan the Barbarian line. They make some really really good ones, man. There's no doubt about that. And I know they did some Toxic Avenger and Team Toxie, the cartoon
Yep.
series stuff, which was cool. So yeah, they make some good figs. There's no doubt about it. They get pricey though on the resale market. They get super pricey, but again, what's the difference if you buy that or you buy a sports car? It's whatever brings you joy.
Yeah, no, I totally
That's me.
agree with you there. So you have two kids?
I do. Yeah, I have a daughter and a son.
Nice.
They
Yeah,
keep me busy.
currently without kids, but that's fine for me. I'm in my early 30s. I'm married though, so I can relate
Okay,
on that
yeah.
front.
You know what? Everyone's got their timetable. Some people just don't want to have kids, and that's cool too. You know what I mean? It's everyone's different. Some people never want to be living with someone ever in their life, and they're fine just being by themselves, and that's cool. Uh, but yeah, I'm fully married, super married with kids and two dogs. So there's a lot of meat in this house. Let's put it that
Nice, man.
way.
Yeah, yeah. I got a dog and a cat, and I'm surprised. He's a Frenchie, and he has all the typical like
Of
French
course,
bulldog traits, where it's like he's stubborn as hell. He'll like whine and pout, a lot.
of
Like,
course,
but you love him anyways,
of course. Yeah, I mean, dogs are gonna do what dogs are gonna do. You really can't be upset when. We used to have. He passed away about a year ago, but we had a miniature Schnauzer, dude. For 15 years, that dog never stopped barking. But that's what they were to do. They were alert dogs, so
Yep.
you couldn't really get that upset with them for barking. This is what it is. So yeah, we love dogs very much. we have many. Yeah,
Nice,
one's right
man.
behind me. Yeah.
So do you remember like the first time you listened to like metal music? Then maybe a little before
Oh
Arrive.
sure. Oh yeah. I always love having these kinds of conversations, especially about music, because it's always very interesting to see why anyone, including yourself, begins to like what they like. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And I think like most people, you start getting into music around, I don't know, like middle school.
Yep.
Maybe I remember when I was like in elementary school. Again, I'm a little older. I remember getting like a tape. Like I remember for whatever reason, the first tape I bought was Ghostbusters 2, the soundtrack. I don't know why. I guess I like the theme song. I don't know. And my mom would put stuff on the radio. My dad hates music. My dad can't listen to music. He can't work
Okay.
to music. Can't drive to music. The only song that he likes is "Tequila Sunrise" by the fucking Eagles. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse. I apologize.
That's
But
fine.
but the Eagles, and I hate the Eagles. And he for whatever reason he's like, that's the most beautiful song ever written. It's okay. It's not. I wouldn't agree to that, but whatever. So like my mom was really the person that would put on music all the time, and then like by middle school, I got into obviously Nirvana. I think every kid gets into Nirvana around that time because you're really emotional and you're like, yeah, this dude speaks to me. I'm so deep right now because I'm pissed off at my mom or something. Who knows? And I was really into The Offspring.
Okay.
So the first couple albums by The Offspring, were like huge for me. And then what's interesting is most of my friends were getting into like Hendrix, Zeppelin, Cream, that kind of like very, rock heavy Led Zeppelin kind of stuff. And I liked it. And I noticed actually that a lot of the songs that I liked the most by like, let's say Zeppelin were kind of the more the metal songs, Achilles Last Stand, No Quarter. Like these were like very now I would say are kind of the more edgier songs, Doom and things like that.
Yeah, Joey's Last Stand rules. Love that
Oh yeah,
song.
it's a great song, and No Quarter is a great song because again, it's an atmospheric doom metal song, Uh, and then I always say that again because of album art, I remember going to the mall, with my sisters or my mom or something like that, and I bought Manowar's Louder Than Hell, purely based on the Ken Kelly artwork. I was like, well,
Yep.
this looks badass. It's got a dude slamming his hand against an anvil. This looks cool as hell. And that blew my mind. I have such a love for that album. And if you talk to Manowar fans, which I am one, that's not really one of the albums that you'll see being
No.
on top of the list, but it is for me because that album had come out. I remember it was on like the new releases. It came out like 95 or something like that, and I picked it up. And not to sound like all VH1 about this, but I never heard anything like that, compared to what all my friends were listening to, very bluesy, and I like the blues. But I was like, yo, this is like straightforward. It's just pounding. They're talking about things that I like. They're talking about, warriors and people being beefed up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember playing this. I was like, yeah, that's really cool. I was like, yeah, but like, check this guy. No, this is Carl Logan. Those that know Carl Logan, we don't like him very much anymore, but at least he's playing at the time. I was like, dude, check this guy out. Like, you guys are talking about Hendrix, and it's no offense to Hendrix, but I was like, dude, listen to this dude. They're like, yeah, it's okay. And I'm like, what? Like, this guy's like all over the fretboard doing. It's like, it looks technical, but it doesn't sound good. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that kind of led me down the rabbit hole. And I would remember I would go to either like Sam Goody or The Wall or any of those stores, and I would just look for the creepiest album covers. And this is like pre-internet. I mean, the internet was there, but we sure as hell didn't have it on our phones. And you'd have to make some impulse buys. So, like I said, I bought Sepultura, I bought Deicide on impulse, I bought Cannibal Corpse on impulse, Judas Priest. I bought on impulse. I was like, oh, I heard that Breaking the Law song. That must be cool. And just by rare chance, I bought Unleashed in the East, which today is one of my favorite albums of all time. I don't care that it was actually recorded in a studio. Still awesome.
Yeah.
And then that leads you into talking to people and then reading at that time like Metal Maniacs. You go to a store and you would just read like, oh, that looks really cool. Oh, this is like that. And then I heard bands like Death and Morbid Angel, and it just organically started there. But it probably started with either picking up Sepultura's Arise or picking up Manowar's Louder Than Hell. And they changed my life for
That's
sure.
awesome, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a newer Manowar fan. It's like I had
It's all
to
good.
adopt kind of like what they're going for and like get on board and like
Yeah.
It's like I don't even know if I like them, but then it's like how I listened to them so many times that there's no irony at all to it. I'm still figuring it out for myself, but I'll put it on and have a good time. So
that's perfect. That's how it should be. You talk to any serious Manowar fan, it's a weird line between irony of like, this is really, really, really lame, and then like, this is so badass. And that's the way it should be. You know what I mean? It really, like, sometimes you're like, yeah, and but then at the same time, you're like, this is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But it's still cool. I've seen them a couple times. They don't play the States very often.
They don't.
And I know people that have tried to book them. Their demands are quite egregious, actually. But I saw them a couple times. They are not as loud as they advertise. I've heard louder bands. I got to be honest with you. They talk about being the loudest, at least not when I saw them. I saw them 3 times. And I will say, though, they are great shows. If you like Manowar and you see them, you are going to get exactly what you think you're going to get. And it's a lot of fun. So I really wish they would tour the States more. But you're not the only one. I know a lot of people that like never big Manowar fans, but all of a sudden are like, yeah, I kind of... Kyle from Undeath. He was a big fan of like the really early albums, like Battle Hymns and Into Glory, and he's like, I don't like the later stuff, and I'm like, bro, you got to listen to it, man, just listen to it. And then he's like, dude, I took your advice, listen to it. He's like, man, this stuff is really, really good. So if you ever see Kyle, if he sees this, Kyle, and he walks around because he's rocking the Manowar gear, which I love. If he ever talks about any of the later albums, that's because of me, because I forced him to listen to it.
Nice, man.
He's a great dude, though, so it's all good.
But that's pretty cool when you're talking about when you bought like those ones just off the covers, and it was
Hmm.
pretty wide range. I mean, like, did you like Deicide and Cannibal Corpse the first time you heard it, or did you kind of listen to it enough that you started to dig it?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? You kind of like
Yeah,
it's like coffee. You kind of force yourself to like it after a while.
yeah,
There were some that I remember buying and not particularly liking 100%, but then learn like over. I don't know, like your taste buds change for it. Deicide I liked off the bat.
nice.
Uh, I don't really listen to them anymore. But that first the self-titled album, especially, man, I played that thing out. It was so weird because again, it was death metal, but it was that early type of death metal where these guys were just huge fans of like Maiden and Priest. So
Hmm.
like you could hear that influence, but it still had that, energy and stuff to it that was different. Cannibal Corpse I never really liked, and I'll be honest, Cannibal Corpse is one of those bands I personally really don't get into their music until much later when they got more technical. I'm a huge prog head.
Me
So
too.
when like Jack Owens joined and they started, I mean, they always were very good musicians, don't get me wrong, but the composition was less of that kind of Tampa Bay, late 80s, early 90s style, and really started to embrace like different time signatures, really going all over the place with their riffs and stuff that I thought, wow, this is like Gore Obsessed is one of my favorite albums of theirs. Because again, they really kind of embrace their musicianship, and it shows because they're all extremely talented. And George is
Yeah,
too. I mean, the way George is able to sing and still let the music shine, and the vocals are George. You know what I mean? It's who he is. So I remember, when you said that, the first band that came to my mind was Iced Earth,
hmm,
and it was one of those things. Okay, you like Man of War, you should like these bands. And I remember picking up an Iced Earth album and I'm being like, there's some songs I like, and there's some parts of songs that I like, and then there's this other stuff that I really don't like. Uh, and so I was like, like I get it, like they're kind of cool. And then over time, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to like this style of music a bit more. So I don't know. That's a weird question, but yeah, Manowar right off the bat I like. Sepultura I liked right off the bat because Sepultura is more of really a thrash band than a death metal band, especially by that point.
yeah,
Um, and I know I like Deicide. I'll be honest with you, I was never the biggest fan of Morbid Angel. Still not.
really.
Yeah, sue me. I know,
Oh,
but
it's fine.
I respect them. I've seen them live. They're great. Obviously, they're talented. Eric Rutan is from Philly, Delaware area. He's always repping the Eagles, and extremely talented. But I just never got into them like other people did. Just don't know why. So
No,
so yeah,
yeah.
I think some bands are like that. Yeah, you kind of learn to get into it. I don't think anyone at like the age of 12 automatically is like, yes, I'm looking for suffocation. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I mean, I've been thinking about like who is my favorite death metal band, and if it just goes off of plays, it probably is Suffocation for me. I'm seeing them tonight, so I'm pretty stoked about
Oh,
that.
really? Oh, that's awesome. They're awesome live.
Yeah, oh yeah, and the new
So
vocalist does a really good job, I think.
he's
It's
good.
no
He's
Frank,
great.
but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's just how it is. Suffocation is great, and that's a really clear answer for me. It's gonna be. I mean, the cheap answer is death.
yeah. Well, and
Again,
that's
as
what they're opening for is Death to All.
yeah, exactly. I haven't seen them. I'm lucky enough that I'm just by pure circumstances of my conception, I was able to see Death on the Sound of
Hell yeah,
Perseverance tour. I snuck out of the house to see that. My mom definitely was not a fan when she found out that I snuck out with my friend to go there to the Trocadero, which is a place that used to a lot of the bands would play. But for me, Death, and I like the later years of Death. I like Individual Thought Pattern, Symbolic, Sound of Perseverance, because again, I'm a huge prog head. And Chuck was always trying to be like Watchtower, was always trying to be like Psychotic Waltz. He wanted that to be progressive. He just got better. He got better and better with every album, and he was able to get more progressive. And of course, that led to Control Denied, which I wasn't the hugest fan of. The music was great. I wasn't a big fan of Tom
the
Amar.
vocals.
Yeah, and he just passed away actually, the vocalist. But I like Chuck's vocals. I like that mix of having that progressive death metal sound with like the death metal vocals. But Suffocation's great too. That's awesome. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have to say for me it's Death, but that's like the obvious answer. I don't know.
No, I mean that's great. I'm 100% with you, and I'm very stoked to hear because I think they're going to be playing mostly later era stuff. So this shirt I'm
Really?
wearing, this is the other tribute band Left to Die, and they did all the early stuff. So I'm pretty sure they're going to be playing more later stuff with Death to All.
I think
Basically,
was it
because
was it
Hoagland's
left?
on drums.
Who's on drums?
Hoagland's on drums,
No
Gene
way.
Hoagland, and then
Yeah.
Steve DiGiorgio's on bass, and then they played the later era stuff. So I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it's going to be a little more, human on, but we'll see. They'll
Gotcha.
probably play some early stuff too.
I'm sure they'll pull the plug and things like that. I remember
Yeah,
it was like Left to Die, and then there was also that band Gruesome or Grotesque that was
gruesome.
kind of
Yeah,
is that they did like the first album was meant to sound like Scream Bloody Gore, and then their next album was to sound like this and all that. And I have to say the early albums, I'm a huge fan of Spiritual Healing, which I know is like apparently a hot take,
no, I like that one a
but
lot.
I like James Murphy on guitar. I liked him when he was in Obituary, and he had a couple really good solo records in the late '90s that I really like. So earlier stuff, I really like Spiritual Healing. I thought that was really good songwriting. But for me, when I put on Death, it's probably either going to be Symbolic or Sound of Perseverance because I think those albums are flawless.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm a big prog fan as well.
Nice.
So I guess how'd you get into prog, and like what are some of your favorite bands there?
Purely by chance.
Yeah,
It's if we're talking again, Usual Suspects. My two favorite bands of all time are Genesis and Marillion. Um, and
Marillion box sets right there.
oh, when this is over, I mean, I met Fish.
Oh, you did.
Oh yeah, the last time he toured, he came to Philly, and I got a picture with him. I was part of his fan club for a while. I've got a signed picture of him. Something that poster actually with the frog. That's actually a Fish tour poster when he toured in Scotland. Um, I'm a diehard Marillion fan. I love Genesis. I love King Crimson. I love Yes. Again, those are like the usual suspects. I mean, of those. But I think again, it was a natural progression. I started listening, again to death metal, and when you're younger, and I was in a lot of bands, and I played guitar, and so like you kind of naturally gravitate to where the guitar is the center. So at that time, it was like Children of Bottom. I was like,
Yeah,
well, yeah, Alexi's great, and it's so guitar heavy. You know what I mean? It's so guitar heavy. No offense to anyone else in the band. But then, like, and then I would listen to this band and then, this band, like, oh, yeah, someone played me again, like Watchtower. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like pretty wild stuff. And then, you kind of go through that and you find these bands and who they're influenced by. And I've always heard of Genesis, I mean, I knew the stuff with Phil Collins, like from Invisible Touch and the later albums. But, you always hear, oh, the Peter Gabriel stuff. So, I picked up those. I was like, dude, this is amazing. Like this, like everyone on that album is absolutely incredible. And then you just start from there. And yeah, I mean, I'm such a die. I'm so a die. There's actually a tribute band called Musical Box
yeah,
from
they're
Italy.
great.
I've seen them. I've run out of friends to take to it because everyone comes with me once and they're like, I get why you like it, but I don't like Genesis that much. So this is a bit weird. And I'm like, I just got to find someone else to come with me then, because I love them so much. And yeah, I'm a huge prog head. I'm always looking out for the latest and greatest prog band. I don't know
Nice.
why. You're right. It's just a vibe. You just feel it. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. That's all.
Well, both genres of music, metal and prog, if you're like a collector like we are, there's a hunt aspect to it. You
Totally.
always I always want to find that hidden gem 1970s band that no one talks about. I love that kind of chase. And then, like you're saying, Genesis, King Crimson, I mean, there's such a well of good music that you can always go back to it.
Totally. And especially they've been around for so long. Like King Crimson, when you ask someone like, what's your favorite King Crimson album? It's like, well, what era?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, we talking early? I like Wake Up Poseidon. Oh, we talking Red? Well, if we're talking '80s, I like Discipline. You can't really compare those albums against each other because they're so wildly different in sound and scope. And same thing with Genesis. My favorite Genesis album is Trick of the Tail.
That's my favorite as well.
and when you talk to like hardcore Genesis fans, that's not an uncommon thing to hear. He's like, well, isn't that Phil Collins? I don't care, like because Squonk is one hell of, or Los Endos at the end. I mean,
Dance Off
yeah, it's
Volcano, such an awesome
so
intro
good. And
track.
Mekong Delta actually covered that song.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's they're like a
yeah.
thrash band, right?
If you like prog, you should not. The early Meek, no, they're death metal, but they're technical death metal. The early stuff
Okay.
is more death. Then they became very technical. Their last few albums have been straight prog metal. I would highly recommend. I love Mekong Delta because again, they have such a wide range. Every album sounds different, but yeah, they cover a bunch of Genesis tunes all the time.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Did you ever get into like black metal, or are you more death metal, or just both?
Uh, I don't know, here and there.
Yeah.
There's, again, I know I keep referencing this, but like I was getting really, really into the underground metal scene. You're talking mid to late 90s. So that was the black metal explosion,
Right.
right? We had the Swedish death metal stuff had already kind of come out and become a big deal and stuff. And then you had your Mayhem came out and Emperor came out, and there were some. I contend that Cradle of Filth was one of the better bands that came out because they had pretty good production, and they also sounded a little different because they were from England, so they had kind of a different sound.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with some of the Mayhem stuff. I like Emperor. Ishan was really good at what he did, but there was this progression of, well, how can we like be as cult as possible? Like production isn't a bad thing, and if I can't hear what you're playing, just hearing a bunch of fuzz and someone doing these gargoyle-like vocals, it's not doing anything for me. You know what I mean? And I get it. It's the punk rock side of metal, right? But there are some great bands. There's some ones that really defined themselves and really took the craft seriously. I'm not a big fan of them personally, but Dissection was one of those. They come from, they're black and thrash or whatever you want to call it, but they came from the black metal scene, but also took the production and the writing seriously. And there's a lot of good black metal bands out there.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of cult aspect has been left in the 90s, thank God. And you just have to weed through all the Nazi stuff here and there. But now we have the
Yeah.
internet, so it's so much easier. In the 90s, it was tough. We heard that I remember, we always heard, I liked Marduk, and people were like, yeah, I heard they're like, they're kind of Zig Heiling. And I was like, really? And it's like, oh, Panzer Division Marduk came out. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And then I saw them live, and there they were doing,
Oh, wow. They
certain
actually did
political
that live?
gestures. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And the crowd was, half the crowd was into it, half the crowd was like, okay, gonna go out, catch a smoke. Gonna go to the merch table. And then it's like, all right, well, we'll cross that one off the list. But now it's so much easier. You can just look stuff up on your phone and be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna avoid them. We're gonna move on. But yeah, there's some good stuff. But I was never huge into it. I like some of the bigger bands. Dimmu Borgir's early albums were pretty cool, but I never really followed them that much.
What about like Enslaved, since they have a more prog angle?
I was never the biggest Enslaved fan, because I heard that, and I remember picking up, and I couldn't tell you what album it was. It was a couple years back. And yeah, it was. It definitely had and I dug it. I just couldn't get into it. Like, you're right. Yeah. Is it Frost is the main dude? Who's
Frost
the main guy?
Albums. It's a Norwegian name that I don't know. It's like Igor or something, or I'm totally off.
I forget the main guy from Enslaved, but you can clearly tell the guy knows what he's doing. He definitely has a love for prog.
I believe so.
That makes sense. But you could tell he loves prog because there's definitely a lot of technical elements. And it was kind of the same thing with like Opeth. When like Still Life came out and things, and I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this sounds a lot like Camel. And I remember friends of mine being like, who the hell's Camel? I was like, oh, it's this British prog band. They're awesome. And like the more and more, obviously now they're just a pure prog band at this point. but yeah, Michael Ackerfeld, or Mikhail Ackerfeld, how you say his name, has said like Camel is one of his biggest influences, and you could tell because his music sounds like it. But yeah, I never really got into Enslaved that much. It's nothing against them, just didn't do it
Oh,
for me.
totally, man.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Kind of pivoting back to art a little bit. So I think that the medium that you use in the surface, it's ink on wood.
Yep.
Is that correct? So how did you kind of evolve into that? Because I mean, most
Yeah.
15-year-olds want to just pick out wood and ink. So how'd you get there?
Well, I wasn't 15. I was more like 35.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That's insane, man.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of to go a little bit back to explain that. I mean,
Yeah.
I always drew. Again, growing up reading comics, I wanted to be a comic book artist. I hadn't. My parents bought me an art desk, and again, I had Wizard magazine. I worshipped Jim Lee. All that kind of stuff. I wanted to be a serious comic book artist. That didn't happen. I'm not very good at it. Maybe that's why. Or at least I wasn't then. And people said, "Oh, did you go to art school or anything?" And not really. I didn't go to art school. I had like summer camps when I was a kid. Pottery camp, art camp, that kind of thing for like a week long. But I always drew. I was in art classes in high school. I'm a professor now, my day job. So I always say one of the things that sucks about phones is people lose the lost art of the doodle when you just had to wait and you had nothing else, so you would just draw. And in college, I painted a little bit, and I would always drew. But it really wasn't until like we're in 2017, 2018, that I was like, there was some personal and professional things that weren't really going 100%, and I needed some outlet outside of music. And I was like, well, why don't I just start painting again? And that's really when I started kind of from scratch. But I gravitated towards ink because I was and am a huge fan of Scott Fisher, who's an amazing artist. He has no idea who I am, but he does a lot of work for Magic the Gathering, does a lot
Okay.
of work for WotC, and he paints on Duralar, which is like a translucent film, and he inks on one side, paints on the other, then paints on the other side, and he uses all things, but he primarily uses ink. And I was so enamored with his process videos just on Instagram, and I was like, man, I got to try this. Big shock, my stuff didn't look like it. It didn't look good at all, actually. But that was really where I started messing around with ink. I don't have a lot of ventilation nor the money to get into oils because that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very good at it either. But that was, I started messing around with that, and I got better and better and better and better. And so that's why I use what I use, because that's how I can paint what I paint is with
That's
that. I don't
awesome,
know.
man.
There's no other explanation for it. Then I found a cheat code with using ink, that's it.
Well, yeah, because it has a oil-like look, but then you got all the disadvantages of oil. You basically are cutting out, like you were just talking about. Like, I mean, it looks like its
Yeah.
own thing, but I'm just saying, like, if you
No,
didn't
totally.
know and you said oil, people could believe it for sure.
Oh, yeah. There's kind of pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
The pros of oil are immense, right? The cons, of course, is that it takes forever to dry.
Yep.
And you could paint something, and then you're trying to paint, and it's already mixing, and it's been like 3 months, and it still is like live. Ink dries very fast. It dries within 5 minutes. Whatever I put down there is dry. So you kind of have to work with a little bit of speed sometimes to blend colors. But that's, again, there's pros and cons to it. But I appreciated that I faked the oil look.
Yeah, in your own signature way, and that's really cool that you've only been doing it like really seriously for that long.
Yeah.
Your work it speaks for itself, man. It's like
Thank you.
really exceptional.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So I do a lot of like watercolor and gouache painting. So I imagine there's quite a
Nice.
bit of overlap in terms of the process too, drying quick and kind of working in layers and stuff.
Big time. Yeah. I don't know much about gouache. I know it's It's a medium, and I think I painted something in high school in gouache. Actually, it's a stupid story. So in our class in high school, we had to find things to paint, and being the stupid kid that I was, I forgot that I needed something to paint for this project. And I remember it was a gouache painting. It's the only reason why I remember gouache. And so I ran out to my car, and I had the latest Judas Priest live album with Tim the Ripper Owens. And so I was like, oh, I'll paint Tim the Ripper Owens' face. And my mom has all my high school art stuff and my sister's art stuff and all that kind of stuff on her walls. And so out in Westchester, Pennsylvania, in this, my mom and dad's house, there is a gouache portrait of Tim the Ripper Owens. And still to this day.
So random.
And I posted that on Instagram, and I was like, it's still there. And I actually tagged him, and he actually responded to it. He's like, your mom's pretty badass. That's really good. And I was like, okay. It's crap. It's not good. But, just so Tim knows, some 70-year-old woman's got his portrait up on her wall, and she loves it. But yeah, I don't know much. I've worked with watercolor. I'm not very good with it. But yeah, there's two types of inks that I use. One is an acrylic ink, and one is it's called Aquafine. It's a watercolor ink. Okay. So it stays. The best way I say is it stays live longer. So I'll put it down, and even in a couple days, if I put some water to it, it'll blend a little bit. Oh. So there's certain times, especially for backgrounds, I'll use more of the watercolor ink. Other cases where I really want it to be bold, I'll use just the standard FW ink because it won't blend as much. But like you're saying, it's layers. It's like constant layers upon layers upon layers to really get that color that you're looking for sometimes.
Yeah, like with gouache, it functions kind of similarly. It has some qualities that are kind of like opaque acrylic paint, and then there's a lot of qualities that make it feel like watercolor. So it's a very versatile medium. Like one thing that it could help, like if you did your process the exact same way, if you want to just experiment with gouache, if you want to do any white highlights, that's an easy way to do it. And use like some of the benefits of it with the opacity. But I like it because I can put down some watercolor, and then if I want maybe like some softer blended edges or something, I can kind of use that to, like if you want to do any kind of like smoke effects where it's partly transparent, like it's good for that. But there are definitely some people that do just gouache, and it was very common in like the 70s and 80s with like animation and stuff because it dries super quick.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So a lot of like Disney like animators and like background illustrators, they would use like gouache a lot.
Speaking of that, I love reading stories about, in the 70s, 80s, and in the 90s, not only animation, comic books as well, but animation as well. They were so creative because it was all about speed. They had to get it done. It wasn't about, does this talk to my soul or anything? It was, we got to get these pages done. I get paid per page. We got to get this done. Same thing with cell work. Like, dude, we got a deadline. That duck doesn't look good. Too bad. You just got to figure it out, keep it moving, that kind of stuff. So it's always amazing reading about the processes of back then, especially without the internet and the digital aspect that they could use. I remember I went to, my wife and I were in Seattle for something, and they had at one of the museums this huge thing of comics, particularly Marvel, and they had a bunch of the movie props that I could care less about. But they had all this original panel work from Jack Kirby, from Frank Miller, for all these people. And it was so amazing. I was getting choked up because there was these Frank Miller Daredevil things that I stared at as a kid. And here I'm looking at it. And you could see the blue pencil lines, and you could see the white out, and you could see where, one panel had to be replaced. So it was just taped right over, you know what I mean? And things where you could see there were some pages where the panels were drawn separately, but they had to rearrange them. And it was so amazing to see how they were able to do it before the digital era. And there's not that there's anything wrong with the digital stuff. I'm a fan of it, but it was just crazy to see how they did it. And I remember reading that Jack Kirby, the reason why Jack Kirby was so amazing is he used to draw his pages. He would start in the upper left corner and just draw down. He didn't map
Like, is
anything
he
out.
printing or something?
Yeah, like he would just start there, and they said because you could apparently, when he was alive, obviously, you could pay to just hang out with him. You know, you pay and you could hang out in the basement. He would talk to you while he was drawing. People would say he had a bunch of pencils, an old ruler from high school or whatever, and he started at the top left and just went down and figured it all out. You know, and it's amazing because of it. But again, it was about speed. I don't have time to plan things out. I got to get this page done because I got to go on to something else. So I think there's a lot to learn there. You know.
Yeah, totally.
So.
I was watching it for the first time, the movie Wizards, the 1977
Oh
movie.
yeah,
and it,
that's
it's
Ralph.
a bit odd and dated, yeah. But
was it Basque? How do you pronounce his last name?
Ralph
Basque.
Gosh,
Yeah, it's a weird movie.
I'm gonna get so many comments about people correcting me. I'm just making mistakes left and right. But yeah, weird movie, but.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about inventiveness, like they used a lot of inventive qualities, like with like the projections and like the watercolored backgrounds and the Ian Miller, like giant illustrations at the end with like the castles. Like you could kind of tell like there were aspects that just at the last minute kind of congealed together. Like you could tell there was
totally.
an element of spontaneity to it, and I thought that was pretty cool. Like that same magic you were talking about, I bet there was some in making that movie.
That's the one where it has the person that was shot with the arrow and it shows them their corpse slowly deteriorating over time? Or was that a different one?
Maybe. I maybe just missed that scene when I was watching. I was drawing and listening to it. And
of course, yeah. There's a friend of mine. It's in one of Basky's movies where that happens, and he saw it as a kid, and it says it's haunted him his whole life. You know what the
kids movie, that's
well, what's funny when I think of Ralph Bakshi, I think of Cool World with Brad Pitt, which I hated that movie as a kid. I remember getting it for whatever reason, and I don't know why I've seen it so many times, but I have this weird kind of I dislike it, but I like it at the same time. And whenever people talk about Ralph Bakshi, they talk about Lord of the Rings, they talk about Wizards, and the first thing that comes up to my head is that goddamn movie Cool World. I do not recommend watching it. It's not a recommendation, but for whatever reason, it's what I think of when I think of him. Yeah, but definitely an inventive guy, man. No doubt about that.
Yeah. So we got the ink on wood, and I think I understand to a certain degree. What does the process look like? Do you do like a thumbnail sketch, get the band to approve it, then you basically hit the paints, or how does that typically go from like a full process point?
I mean, every piece is a little bit different as to how you're going to go about it. But generally speaking, yeah. So, we'll go through the normal process with the client. They're interested. Of course, they'll say, what do you charge? And then it's like, well, it depends. We do this dance back and forth. And I understand, everyone's got a budget and, no one wants to be the first one to drop a number. I get that. But I always say one of the hardest things in this business is just getting clients first off to say, this is what I want. Right. Some do, right? They're like, look, this is specifically what I'm looking for. I'm looking like this style. It needs to have this, and this. It should look, and that's great. But then there's some folks that are like, well, we're not really sure, and that's okay. It's not like a diss, but it's like they don't, because my wife is like this. If you say like, okay, we have a bunch of furniture, how should we put it in this room? She can't visualize it. She has to physically see it and move everything around. And so there's some people that be like, well, we really don't know what we want, but we know we want something that looks like this. I'm like, okay. So I draw up a sketch and they'll say, oh, can we do this? Sure, fine. But then what happens is while I'm painting it, a lot of times people will be like, well, actually, could we do this? Could we do that? And that's sometimes it's little and we can do it. And other times it's like, that's a major change. No, we cannot. Right. but it's all respectful and it's professional, and it's not meant to be a negative thing. But normally, yes. So once we go through the pleasantries and all that kind of stuff, I'll say, okay, what do you want? And I'll come up with an idea, and I'll sketch it up. I used to sketch it up on paper, but now it's so much easier just to sketch it up on Photoshop. It's really elementary. My sketches are. I wish I had one. I usually throw them out. My sketches are very bare. They're very bare. Most times, I really wish I had like an extra sketch somewhere so I could show it. But most of the time, it's just like kind of basic anatomy. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So like I know where the head's gonna be. I know how long the arms. You know what I mean? Because that's one of the harder things. And it's like, okay, it looks like this, and depending on how much time I have, maybe I'll do a little coloring. I'll get on Photoshop, to give an idea. But I always tell them, look, you see how I paint, it's gonna look like that, right?
Right.
It's not gonna, it's gonna look like that. But I also, things kind of change while I'm painting, not huge things, but adding a little bit here. Wow, this isn't making it as three-dimensional as I wanted it to be. Slowly adding in details. And I'll honestly, sometimes I'll be like, for example, like the one that you have behind us for the
Like
abraded
get
cover.
right. Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Maybe I should add maggots to the first head. You know what I mean? That head that's right there. I didn't think, wow, that's going to be a lot of work. Am I going to be able to paint them that small and make them distinct and come alive? And I was able to do it. At least to the best of my ability when I was doing it. And so one of the things I tell them is like, here's the sketch. Are we cool with the basics? And they're like, okay, all right. So then, I cut my wood. I could go to an art store and get it, but it's so much more expensive. I go to Lowe's. I buy sheets of oak plywood or something like that, and then I have a table saw and I just cut it the dimensions I want. I gesso it, and then I do old school. I print out my sketch. I rub the back with charcoal. I tape it on and rub it on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know people that still like to do the old school method and plan it right on the canvas, and I think that's great, but I'm not that good. So then I have that on the canvas, and then I just hit it. And like watercolor, you got to start with some basic colors. And once it dries, it's going to change a little bit, and you're going to notice that you thought it was vibrant and it thinned out. And
Yeah.
then you put in another layer, and then another layer, and then it's like cleaning a dirty house. You just pick one thing and say, okay, I'm going to start there, and then we'll work it out. And that's kind of how it. And I always send pictures to the clients. This is how it's going. How are we liking it? Anything that you want to add? Anything you don't like? Tell me now. Because as you get further and further along, it's harder to make those adjustments. And 99.9% of the cases, it's like, yeah, it's not a problem. People are
Hmm.
usually pretty cool with it.
I mean, I got to ask, man. So if you got a full-time job and two kids, like,
Yeah.
how do you do this?
With a great amount of difficulty.
Yeah, it does not seem easy, man.
Yeah. I try to explain that to people, and anyone who follows me on Instagram knows, I'm a economics professor. So, from 7 in the morning till about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, I'm either teaching or doing office hours. I get home, walk my dogs. My wife works from home. Say hello to her. She's got the corporate job. And then I'm painting. And then my kids come home, got to deal with parental things. And then I have an art desk here in my wonderful office. I also have an art desk downstairs where me and my wife watch TV so that we can watch TV and I can continue to do what I'm doing.
Nice.
It's nonstop. Yeah. I'm never bored. I do not know the sensation of boredom since both my children were born, but my first kid was born. I'm always busy.
That's awesome, man.
Yep.
Good work ethic, and I'm in a similar boat too. Besides the kids aspect, full-time job, my wife full-time job.
Yeah.
We both work from home currently, and then
Nice.
I just try to do as much as I can outside of it.
And when it comes to clients, I used to be a lot faster than I am now. I used to be known for getting stuff done, especially during COVID when like I was teaching from home, so I didn't have the travel, I didn't have the commute. Things were different. And it's like, yeah, I can knock something out in a couple days. Sure, not going anywhere. You know what I mean? It's not like there was much going on. But now. Maybe it's also because I'm able to do better artwork. I tell them, look, it's going to take a little bit long, it's going to take me about a month to do, right? I'll do the best I can. Well, but yeah, as long as you're upfront, most people are cool with that. They're like, yeah, we get it. I tell them I got a full time. And also then stuff happens. You get sick. My kids get sick, which just naturally means you're eventually going to get sick. Things happen in real life. It's how it is. And as long as you're not, an a-hole about it, it's fine.
That's cool. I guess what do you enjoy most about creating art now that you've found this passion since 2017?
Sure. Oof. Well, first, and I have conversations about other artists, especially ones that do album covers and work with bands. It's a double-edged sword. You know what I mean? There's not a huge amount of money in it, especially for the bands that I work for. I mean, they don't have a big label support. You know what I mean? So You understand. Look, when you charge them, you charge someone $700, $800, $1,000. That's a lot of money. For a band that's self-releasing an album or is on a small. Now you got to charge what you got to charge, but it means a lot. But for someone who was so influenced by album cover art, still am. You know what I mean? The fact that not only bands trust me enough to put my artwork on their album in the hopes that it will help sell more, or they think what I'm painting helps enhance the listener to it. But then also commissioning. If you really think about it, someone's coming up to you and saying, look, we put this labor of love, we made this album, we have this idea of what we want the cover to look like, and we think you're the one that's going to be able to make it come to life. I think it's really cool. Now it's also work. So it's not like, wow, you're just ecstatic. Sometimes I really hate painting this. This is really difficult. I just have to push through it. But there is a fulfillment to then seeing it, on vinyl when they send it to me, or, if I see someone wearing a T-shirt with my stuff on it, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool because that's me. I'm the same way. You know what I mean? I love seeing different art. I love, seeing bands have really good merch and being able to wear it and things like that. Like, because I know the other side of it. I'm a fan too. So I really do get an enjoyment out of that. And I think, I don't know who said it, and I feel bad because I wish I could attribute this quote, but I remember hearing someone say that the difference between someone who is an artist, a professional artist, and someone who wanted to be a professional artist has little to do with skill. Yeah, some people are just naturally adept to art than others. That's fair. But they said, even if you're really good at art, in the beginning, what you're painting is not going to end up what you want it to look like. You want it to look like this, but it looks like crap. But we both know that the more you practice, the more that you paint, or if it's drawing, the more you draw, the more you paint, the more you sculpt, the more you do everything, you're going to get better. Every piece that I do, it's a little bit better than the one I did before. And they said really the difference isn't necessarily the skill, but that persistence to keep going so that eventually you are able to paint or illustrate what is in your head. And I've gotten there to an extent that now I'm able to take things in my head and I'm able to paint it, and it looks relatively what I wanted it to look like. Mm-hmm. And I'm also into this type of art. Growing up, I loved horror art, I loved fantasy art, I loved sci-fi art. So the fact that I can, paint a picture of a bunch of severed heads on pikes in a jungle, 16-year-old Jerry is ecstatic, because I always wish I could have done that, and now I kind of can, So that's I don't know. That to me, it's very, very satisfying. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, and
yeah,
totally agree. You're always trying to just chase what's in your head and getting it to that level.
Totally.
And then sometimes along the way, you actually find through either accident or just a moment of inspiration that what you had in your head in the sketching phase, there's sometimes when you're pleasantly surprised, you're like, actually, this looks a little better than maybe what I was thinking in my head.
Totally. Yeah. There's some happy accidents, man.
Yeah.
There really is. I'm a huge Bob Ross fan. He's my dude. Grew up watching him, and still, if I'm having a crappy day, I'll put on Bob. And Happy Accents is right, man. He wasn't lying. You know, you'll be painting something, and you'll be like, "Whoa, that actually did something really cool." You know what I mean? Like, wow, that's pretty wild. Yeah, let me try that again. You know, and yeah, it works. It's awesome.
Yeah, I also love to, because we're both like handmade artists, is the ability to recover from a mistake. It kind of reminds me too of like, so you're a musician, I'm a drummer
Mhm.
as well, and like when you're playing in front of a crowd, like live, if you make a mistake, you got to know how to recover. So like
Totally.
that same mindset of like being calm and confident and being able to overcome that, like I think that's a really cool skill that I want to keep improving. And I just
Definitely.
always enjoy about like both art and music is that ability to recover.
And I think there's also an ability, as we were talking about earlier, to kind of give ourselves a little slack sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, okay, this doesn't look like Frazetta. That's okay.
Yeah.
All right, you don't paint as well as Boris does. You're still doing okay. It took me a while to really kind of be, because again, like I said, I'm not very good with compliments of my artwork, and I don't know why. I feel very weird about it. And but when people say like, man, like yeah, you know, this doesn't happen all the time, but you know, they say, man, you're one of my favorite artists out there right now. I say, I don't know how to take that. I come off kind of like a dick, but it's not because I'm trying to be. It's just that I don't know what to say, and I'm like, wow, you saw that painting and you think it looked incredible. All I see
Yeah. All
is
the
all
mistakes.
the things I did to get around not painting what was hard for me to paint. You know what I mean? And you just kind of have to just over time grow more and more comfortable with the fact that not everything is going to be up to your caliber, but is still perceived to be pretty damn good, which is uncomfortable, you
Totally.
know, but it's part of it.
I think like you probably agree as well to a certain degree. Like the oh, you thought that one was good. Oh, I'm working on one right now that's going to be better. You know, like in
Mm.
your head, I'm always chasing the next one, and I always think the next one's going to fix the problems of the past ones. You know, so it's like
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I always, you know, whenever I'm done painting something, you know, I'll always put it in my Instagram because that's my main outlet to people. I'll
yeah,
put it in the stories because you know, I want people to see because people are following me to see my art and me saying stupid things. Don't take anything I say that seriously. Uh, but you know, putting it as a post, you know, especially with bands, I always tell them, you know, do you want me to wait for you guys? Because I don't want to jump the gun. This is your product.
yeah,
You want to drop the announcement, and some will be like, dude, it's cool, put it out. I had a band recently that was like, dude, put it out. Just don't put our name yet. We're gonna be talking about it in a few months.
I saw
And I
that
was
one. I
like,
like that one a lot.
yeah, yeah, and I was like, that's cool. So you're okay. They're like, we're totally cool. You want to? That's awesome. Just don't put our name on it. I was like, that's fine. And then I have people that say, can you just wait? And I respect that. You know what I mean? And it sucks on my end because it's like as time moves forward, the things I paint I hate more and more and more because I'm progressively getting better. And so it's like, man, I really want to show people this, but I also have to respect their wishes and understandably so. Um, and so some of them are really nice. There's one, you know, friends of mine I did an album cover for, and they had some issues with someone in the band. They had to get someone new to record. They're like, you know, we're really sorry, but we're probably not going to be doing it till May. Or actually, we're not. We're probably not going to drop it till June. We're really sorry. It's like, dude, it's okay. You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? When I do stuff for Creature Skateboards, uh, I'll paint them something, and it won't come out till a year and a half later.
Mhm.
And it's like, look, that's just how it is. They're a big company. You know what I mean? It's not like a band just dropping some digital release. They've got printing that has to be done. They've got advertising that has. It's a big process. So I'll paint something, and I know for a fact I'm not going to be able to show this for almost 2 years, and I'm going to hate it. But when I actually do get to release it, well, that's just how it goes.
That's awesome. You have a couple skateboard commissions, or the one with Creature? Like that's super sick.
I've done 3 skateboard decks for Creature, and I also did a T-shirt design for them. And in
Wow.
fact, the first one I did, was for Jimmy Wilkins, who's vertical, that half pipe skateboarder
Okay.
that hangs out with Tony Hawk. He's not on Creature anymore, but he was on the cover of Thrasher magazine with my skateboard. So
That's so
that
awesome.
was so badass to me, that again, I always wanted to be a skateboarder. I just suck at it. And now I'm old and the threat, if I try, I'm going to break my ankle. I know it. But, I used to read Thrasher magazine when I was a kid, and so when it came out, Keith, the main art guy that I deal with, is just like, yo, just so you know, man, you're going to be, your board is on the
That's
cover of the
unreal, man.
Thrasher. And just to show you like how great my wife, my wife was more excited than I was. She was like, dude, that is like so awesome. We went to the bookstore, we got a bunch of them, I have it framed downstairs, feel like, is your name on it? No, I'm not the important part. Jimmy Wilkins is,
Yeah.
but he's got my board, which is like really, really cool. And I remember, my brother-in-law's brother-in-law, who is a skateboarder, was just like, dude, I saw that it was in Creatures. Like, that's it. Or, it's on the cover of Thrasher. Like, you can't get any higher than that. I was like, in a way, yeah. I'm on, my art, for this deck I did for him was on the cover of the biggest skate magazine, which is awesome. Really, really cool. Doesn't monetarily benefit me at all, but it's still really, really cool.
Yeah. No, man,
So
that's
yeah, so I've done a few boards for them. They're really cool. And they're one of those that I mean, the one board I was just like, look, this is an idea I'm thinking about doing. Do you guys want to buy it? And they're like, yeah, just make it look, disgusting and evil as shit. So I was like, that's cool. That's fine. Yeah. So they're really awesome.
so when you're painting that, do you get the saw out and basically get the wood to be exactly like the shape and everything?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the part that's not fun. Because you're talking, it's about 8-9 inches wide and about like 32 inches long.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually paint them, for whatever reason. They always call me up in the summertime. So I have a window right in front of me. I have the window open and the board is kind of sticking out. You know what I mean? So that I can paint it, and then I kind of have to like do some weird things, and I'm painting it
That's
on the side, but then I have to like make sure it's not like lopsided. It can be difficult. That's a difficult process, but it's worth it. And it's a challenge, which is cool. I can't
and
knock that.
and you're painting it. This is gonna be a dumb question, but you're painting it just like flat, and then when they actually print the board, obviously, then it has the shape to
Yeah,
it. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have to compensate for that at all, do you?
No, you have to be aware of it, that it's going to be trimmed, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware that there's no big details in the corners, because most likely that's going to be trimmed. I know people that do art illustrating, like pen and ink, that will actually have, they'll print out the template bigger so that
Mm-hmm.
they can do it. But I just cut my board as a rectangle, know that it's going to be trimmed. So the meat of the detail, you want to allow for some bleeding on this and here. So the meat of it's right there in the center. So you got to be a little bit creative. You got to do a little bit of research on the process. But yeah, you're not painting on the skateboard. I
Oh
painted
yeah,
on
yeah.
skateboard decks, and that's really tough because it's curved
Yeah.
in every way. So like trying to balance it can be really tough. But no, it's flat. That's not a dumb question at all. It's actually really good one. I painted flat.
Yeah. And then as far as like getting your stuff ready for print, do you do a little bit of Photoshop digital touch ups just so it's ready?
Yeah, I got some of the best advice I got from a friend of mine who's a tattoo artist, but is also an amazing artist in and of himself. Uh, he remember he telling me, he's like, knowing a little bit about Photoshop is going to help you immensely, and he was not lying. That's true. Because okay, you paint something, you're like, this is amazing. Now what do I do with it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to either hire a photographer to take a picture of it. I can't afford that. You know what I mean? Not for the type of work that I'm doing. So you got to scan it. Well, does anyone have a scanner big enough? Probably not. So you got to scan it into sections. Okay, well then, how do I do this? I've tried. There's that app everyone uses, Procreate.
Yeah.
I didn't like it personally. I know other people did. I've just spent so many hours on Photoshop that I'm very comfortable with it. But there was a learning process, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of Googling, how. So first is like, okay, I scanned it, how to get it together. Okay, now I've got it together. If you're painting on wood, there's going to be some issues because depending on the grain of the wood, the shine on the different, there's something. Oh, so now I got to learn how to kind of digitally edit it a little bit. And at first, for me, I was like, but I want it to be true to the painting. But then I was like, but that's stupid because what I painted and what it looks like after I scan it don't look the same. So I'm going to, I got to work with the contour, work with the colors. Oh, I can, there was that one little part in like, okay, I can get rid of that really quick. And that's totally fine. So now, I mean, I'm not the best at Photoshop. I see what some people can do and it's like, but I know enough that I can scan my stuff, get it so that it looks really good for the client. I can, I'm also doing a comic book with some people, so I'm digitally coloring my pages, learning the different brushes. It's all a process. It's all a learning process. So even if you're a physical artist, whether it's Procreate, whether it's Photoshop, whether it's whatever, learn some digital program, because if not, you're gonna have to pay someone else to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's going to help. It's going to help you because then clients are going to say, well, this person knows what they're doing, as opposed to, well, okay, this person's going to paint it, but then we're going to hire this bloke to do it because he doesn't know how to do this or that. She doesn't know how to do this or that. So, yeah, Photoshop is my jam.
No, that's a really good point. Very good point. And not being a purist about it too, because ultimately when you're getting it ready for print, you just want the best quality process
Totally.
Possible.
And I was discussing this with a fellow artist. It puts the control in your hands as opposed to you scan it, you give them to it, and then they digitally edit it, and you're like, could have done it better. I didn't particularly like that. And there's been a couple cases where I've done that, and I was like, ooh, yeah, you could have done a better job there. I wish you would have just asked me, and I probably could have made it look a little bit better. And so now when I'll say, look, here it is. I'm going to do some digital stuff to it. Is there anything that you think you might want to use this for that you want me to do? I'm not going to charge you extra for it because I want it to look good. You know what I mean? It won't take me that long. So it puts more control in your hands as to how the art will be represented. So maybe that's a bit like, I don't know, mean to say, but I don't know.
Oh no, I
mean,
being
a control freak. I don't know.
It's your work that they hired you for, so I think it's totally justified. Now, when it comes to T-shirt printing, though, is there a particular file that you have to send the printer, or they have to?
Again, usually with T-shirt designs, I send it to them just with a Photoshop file. PDS file, PSD file, whatever it is. A couple times had to be a TIFF, a TIFF.
Yeah.
Whatever they tell me they need it in, and anything they need me to do. But what I've noticed, particularly with merch, is the people that are printing the merch tend to do some digital stuff because, again, it's usually screen printed. It's a painting, so there's a lot of colors which they cannot do. Unless they're going to do like 14 screens or something like that, it's usually going to be like 3 or 4. So I know that when I send this to, Frozen Soul, or if I send it to, Undeath or any of these places, I know that they're going to be editing it for a T-shirt, and that's fine. I tell them, if you need any help or anything, let me know. But I get that whoever's printing it is going to be doing their own thing to it. And that's a little bit different than the album cover,
right.
Because it's gonna be different because it's a painting, and they're looking at it from a cost perspective, and screens are expensive. So, it's not going to look just like the painting, but that's okay.
Totally. I think largely those are like the questions I had at least jotted down. Anything while we were talking that you wanted to keep conversing about before we show the artwork?
No. I'm sure more will come up when we talk about the different pieces.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm an academic. You need to tell us to stop talking.
I've lucked out with all my interviews so far, and the guests do most of the talking, so
yeah,
perfect for me.
That's awesome.
All right, let's see if I can pull this thing up. All right, so I have these two here.
Oh wow, that one's a
Now,
blast from the past too.
that's why I got to say I have it, the one on the right, so the Iron Age cover. I have that one intentionally because that was the first piece I saw of yours, and that probably was
Yeah.
really early for you because that came out like 2017 or 18, didn't it?
Yep.
The reissue, at least.
Yeah.
With
Well,
your
yeah.
artwork.
I didn't do the original. So,
Yeah,
wow. That one's really special to me, um, because that was the first real album cover I did. I had done a couple things before that I drew or I painted or whatever, and then people took it and like slapped it on something or whatever. But this was like my first serious commission, by Jason of Iron Age, and of course Eternal Champion, the singer of Eternal Champion. I actually I always joke about this because I'm friends with Jason now, but I kind of fanboyed him a little bit, and I think he's a little bit used to that because he's such a badass individual. But I was a huge fan of the first Eternal Champion album, and I didn't know that he was in Iron Age because I knew Iron Age,
mm-hmm.
because they're such a big band in the Texas crossover scene. And Jason, I was a big fan of Eternal Champion, and I remember DMing him, "I love your music. Tell me more about this book you're writing. It sounds so cool." And we talked a little bit, and then a lot of people don't know that, like, almost everybody except for Jason from Eternal Champions is in Philly. It's technically speaking a Philadelphia band with Jason who lives in Texas. And they played at this place called the Boot and Saddle, and he was working the merch table, and I was like, "Hey, I was talking to you online," and he was like, "You were?" And I was like, "Oh, I was this person." Like, "Yeah." So we started talking, and I had done a T-shirt for another band he was in called Grave and Right, and he really liked what I did. And they went to reissue The Sleeping Eye, which is such an amazing album.
Totally.
And Jason knew of my stuff, and also Michael Greylord, who basically runs a lot of Eternal Champions artwork and printing and deals kind of with that kind of stuff. And he's a good friend of mine, and is a huge fan of my art. And I got to give him a lot of credit. He really pushed Jason. He's like, "Yo, you got to look at Jerry. He's going to do something really, really cool for you." And Jason took this album very seriously because they were re-releasing it. He hated the art from the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "I want to get it right." So I gave him an idea. He told me a lot about the mythology of these characters that he was developing for his book, and some of the stuff that they're doing in Eternal Champion now. And this was one of the gods, and he was being created out of the universe, like he was materializing. So this was an early style that I was doing, and I spent a lot of time on it. Now it's like I would do it completely different, totally different. But he was such a huge fan, and that eyeball is actually the third eyeball. I painted it one way. He called me up, and he's like, "Man, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. Can we make it different?" So then I repainted the eyeball a different way. And he's like, "Oh, this is great." Then he called me up a day later. He's like, "I couldn't sleep." So I painted one more time, and he's just like, "That's it. That's what I wanted to look like." And I was like, "That's cool." And so this kind of, I guess, put me on the map because Iron Age is so huge that when that came out, a lot of people started to notice my artwork and stuff like that, which was awesome. So I always say a lot of my career is due to both Jason and Mike for really putting a lot of trust in me, for doing this, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Again, now I would paint it completely different and probably would do it much better, but at the time, that's what I could do, and they loved it, and a lot of people do. A lot of people still like that. It's hard for me to look at, but it's still kind of special to me because it's
Yeah.
really the first one that I did. And they were supposed to. I don't know how much of this I should say, but there was going to be more. Let's put it that way. That there was actually going to be more in the world of Iron Age and myself, but unfortunately the band didn't last, and then even more unfortunately, Wade Ellison, who's the main songwriter, passed away. So that was it. That was it for Iron Age. So there's that one.
I got a couple comments on that one, if that's cool.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So just in terms of what I'm seeing here, like the way you have that white behind the figure.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I was talking about with like using gouache. So do you do that with like white ink then?
Yeah, so that one wasn't on wood. That one was on Duralar.
Oh, okay.
So again, it's a semi-translucent thing, and that's how I was able to do. If you see in the not only the mixing of the colors, but in the orange on the bottom right, uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like it dries flat and like wet, as opposed to being like spreading like a paint.
Okay.
And I was able to get that effect with it. And then it was just layers and layers of white paint or white ink, excuse me, white ink. And then there's actually technically a white sheet of paper behind it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
I still have it here. Someday I got to give it to Jason. I told him it's his, but yeah.
nice. No, I like this one a lot because it leaves room for the imagination to like fill in exactly what you're seeing. So you see it, but then you can also comprehend it in different ways. The wing thing on the left side is especially cool. I like. Now, when you were doing the eye,
and by the way, and the wing thing is cool because that was one of the happy accidents. I wasn't sure if I would be able to paint it the way I did. You know what I mean? I didn't know if I had the skill to do that.
the light's poking through, which is great.
That was a total accident.
Yeah.
What's interesting is there's a lot of other pieces that I know that you want to talk about. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, I don't know if I can do that. I'm going to try. So there should always, for artists out there, young artists, always have something that is a little bit out of your reach in every painting, because you never know what you'll be able to do. But I'm sorry, continue.
Oh, that's great advice. So when you're talking about redoing the eye each time, like, are you able to scrape the layers? I guess you talked about lifting
paint
it
over it.
With water. Oh, just paint over it with more.
Just paint over it. Yeah. There is technically with ink, you can use rubbing alcohol and Q-tips. And on Duralar, it comes off like a dream. On wood, it depends how many layers. It's not going to come off perfectly. And I used to do that, but now it's like, you know what? There's been cases where I'll be like, let me just get out the gesso. I'm just going to gesso over this, and I'm going to start again of this one section, or I'll paint over it. This I just painted over. That's all.
That's neat. Yeah, because like whenever I dabble with ink on paper, it's just as unforgiving as watercolor, but it seems like you have a little bit more.
It can be. Yeah, that's why sometimes the gesso has to come out. Mm-hmm. You just have to, shellac it, and let's start that one area over again.
No, it's a really awesome piece, man. I'm glad that got your career started. Super cool.
Yeah, it really did, which is wild.
So this one on the left, it's for Ninth Realm, who I haven't personally listened to, but I love the. If I can just talk to it real quick. Sure. There's obviously like the fantastical elements to it, and I mean, it's amazing how well you did the soft edges to just have that flow into the center focus for the eye. I mean, you really crafted an amazing composition here.
Thank you. This one was a lot of fun to do. So Ninth Realm is a band out of, I believe, and I hope I'm right, it's Maryland. I think so. I think they're from Maryland. They're another crossover band. They're a big fan of Iron Age, and I was a fan of theirs before they knew me. I was surprised that they contacted me because most of their art was done by their drummer, who's a fantastic comic book artist and has done most of their black and white artwork. He's a big fan of like Berserk and things like that. And they contacted me and they're like, we want you to do a painting for our album. And I said, cool, what do you want? And they're like, well, we want like a Balrog type creature. Clearly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And people were like, is that supposed to be about? I was like, well, look, I took a Balrog picture and I changed it up and made it my own. But yes, clearly it's a Balrog. And they're like, well, we want this like Conan-like character. He's got to have a scimitar, and he's got magic orb or something in his hand. And I was like, anything else? They're like, we don't give a shit. Just like make it cool. Those are our things. Again, the sketch I have for that is like bare bones. It was basically the Balrog face, and again, up the basics of the anatomy of the warrior-like figure, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's just going into it, painting it, what I want it to look like. And a lot of that stuff that you're talking about around the edges, I mean, I get a lot, again, that's a lot of like Boris, a lot of Frazetta, where you're trying to drag the the viewer's eye to a certain part. Well, obviously we're looking at the Balrog's face, and when I look at it, the first thing I actually see for me is the mouth, right? That's kind of like the center, and the eyes and the center and all that. And then again, it gets more blurry as you get around to the sides. Yeah, that's layers. It's layers and layers and layers and layers to get that smoky, type of feel. But again, it's trusting the process. But that one was a lot of fun. They loved it. People really like it. A couple people were like, "Oh, I see. You're trying to sneak in that it's not." I was like, "No, it's a Balrog. That's what it is. I mean, And I really like. I have to say this to compliment myself. I really like how I did the tongue. I'm still proud of the tongue. A fan of my art sometimes, but I really like how I was able to do the tongue and the blue hair. The blue reflection on the hair was another happy accident that I was able to do.
What do you like about the tongue specifically?
I like when you see the tongue wrap around him. I was able to get the reflection and the lighting on the tongue where I wanted it to be. That's what I like about it, because it's not, well, and this as an artist, the world is three-dimensional, and drawing and painting things three-dimensionally is tougher than it looks, and it's easier to paint things two-dimensionally, if that kind of makes sense.
Totally.
And so I was able to make it as three-dimensional as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome, and this, like the landscape element in the top left corner.
Those are just fun to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of those in my art. They pop up a lot.
Yeah, just like the distant, that way it has that. Yeah.
It adds the 3 dimensions, and anytime I have a landscape, a lot of times I'll put in a moon. Maybe that's just me being Muslim. I'll put in a moon in the back.
Nice. No, that's really awesome, man.
Yeah, I love that one. They loved it too.
The compliments.
Yeah, I try. Yeah.
All right, so we got it braided. We've talked a little bit about this one, but if you want to dive a little bit deeper, I think this is for me, it's another one where, from the outside looking in, it probably got you more commissions too. Like it was one that kind of led to that, because now you're going into the death metal, element, and more death metal bands probably followed suit. Kind of like the crossover element you were talking earlier.
Yeah, so this one was interesting for a couple reasons. One, this was commissioned by the label, not the band.
Okay.
Scott from Maggot Stomp, who I get along with really well. I think it's because we're both old. So we have same generational experiences. But this was actually the second time that a band presented art to a label for their music, and the label said we don't like it. So Abraded apparently had some album art commissioned, Maggot said, "Look, it's not that it's bad, but what you brought is something really for like a demo. This is a big deal. We're putting some money behind this. You need something a little bit better." So Scott contacted me and was like, "Look, they're looking for something cannibal, like ritual, cannibal Holocaust type of thing." And I presented a couple, and this was always interesting. And I credit myself for being able to read people really well. I presented Scott with a couple ideas, and he's like, "Okay, like go ahead, but try to make it like this." And I was like, "All right, he doesn't like this. He's not, he's being nice because he's a solid dude, but and he's trusting me, but it's like he doesn't want this." So I was like, let me scrap this. And I was like, "How about this? What if I do a jungle landscape with a bunch of heads on pikes?" And he's like, "That's it." I was like, that's what we wanted. So I was like, cool. This was a lot of fun because I don't paint jungle landscapes very often. So again, there's a lot of Bob Ross here of trying to construct the humidity of, like a jungle and a river, but you can't really get into super detail when you're doing landscapes, because again, the detail's up front. I can't put as much detail on the first head as I can on like sticks and plants in the back. So it's understanding, again, layers and brush strokes, and green and purple are my 2 favorite colors. So this is a lot of green. So doing different tones of green and showing kind of like the humidity mist in the back with some whites. was a lot of fun. And also, this one was difficult because I knew I had to do a bunch of heads, but to show that three-dimensional aspect, again, the detail on the heads and the back, there can't be a lot, but you still have to put enough detail to show distinction of the face.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a challenge. I did it pretty well. Pat myself on the back. And again, adding the maggots to the front was a lot of fun. And again, I love horror. I love gore. I'm a big, Fulci movie fan. I love horror movies. So anytime I can paint gore is always a good time.
Yeah, kind of like to your point too, with like the second head that's a little farther in the distance.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm trying to draw something kind of like that, it's like I have to think to roughly the same amount of detail, but then I have to be comfortable obscuring it before it's done.
Totally.
And that's kind of like how it is here, which is cool.
Totally.
I mean, you had to know exactly where the eyes are, etc.
And again, anatomy is always a nightmare.
Yeah.
I said this actually on one of my stories. You take like Rob Liefeld is always made fun of for drawing hands and feet really bad or hiding the hands and feet. That's because drawing hands and feet suck. It's not easy, guys. I get it. And like you said, like making sure the eyes were in the right spot and it didn't look weird. I actually like the second head more than I do the first one. Just because I was able to make it distinct, gory, without as much detail as the one in the front. The one in the front was easier because I could put in the maggots, I could put in skin, blood, I could put in all the detail, the hair. I really like how I did. I pat myself on the back. I like how I did the hair tied around the actual pike itself. That was the easy part because I could go into detail. The ones in the back were harder and took more of time actually. So yeah. I do like that one. And Scott of Maggot Stomp is a huge fan of art, and that is hanging in his house. He has a pretty interesting collection of heavy metal art at his home.
I think I saw him post on Instagram, and I remember seeing this one and then a few other Maggot Stomp covers, which is cool. Yeah,
I got a couple other Maggot Stomp stuff in the pipeline, and he's already said, I'm going to buy it. And I'm like, okay.
Hell yeah.
It's yours,
Oh, that's awesome, man. And then this one on the right, is it pronounced Dragon, or how do you pronounce the name of the band? You don't know?
I don't know. Again, this is interesting that you put these two together because the one on the right, again, was commissioned by the label, not the band. This was for the band. I guess it's Dragon.
No Remorse Records, right?
It was on No Remorse. I've done about 5 album covers for No Remorse. Nice. 2 for the band, 3 for the label itself. This is a band that was an 80s hair traditional metal band, put out an album. You can only listen to it on YouTube. And then they had kind of like an unreleased album with some bonus tracks or whatever, and they were going to re-release this all on No Remorse. And Christos from there said, look, this is their original album cover. They want a dragon. They want the dragon holding an orb and some sort of castle building. Do something cool. Again, I presented a sketch, and I don't get to do dragons very often, so this was kind of cool. Again, it's green and purple. Those are my 2 favorite colors. So it was fun to draw a dragon. Obviously, I kind of went with more of like a stereotypical Asian dragon, more of the worm. I like doing the different scales and the colors. So that was a lot of fun to do. And then instead of I have a castle in the background, but I didn't want it to be like a fantasy castle, so I kind of made it more Eastern. Again, maybe it's because I'm Muslim. So I kind of made it more domes and columns and things like that. But I like this. I like this one because, again, I don't get to paint dragons very often. So
that's sick, man.
If you're listening and you want to hire me, have me paint a dragon.
No, it takes some of the elements of like the Japanese style dragon, but it's definitely its own thing too. Like the sail kind of like fin thing, that's like really cool. And then all the hair and the fur is also really cool too. Add some nice motion.
Yeah, and it's not fun to do because again, it's layers upon layers and really defining it. Hair is, it's because my son and daughter like to obviously do art as well, and hair is a big deal because a lot of people will draw hair as strands upon strands, and I say you got to look at hair as a shape. Look at it as a shape and a movement, block that out, and then you can start to add in the distinctions of the brush strokes. But you have to understand the flow of the hair and how big it is. One of the hardest things to do for me is painting or drawing someone with long hair. Because the way hair sits on a head, I mean, if you're bald as shit like me, that's a different story. But the way it sits on everyone's hair is a little different. So think of hair as a shape, have that flow, and then start to put in the strokes to accentuate strands here, strands there. And it's a pain in the butt. I mean, like I said, it's work. But yeah, I think it came out pretty well. You know, I could do some things better, but it came out pretty well. Yeah.
Nice.
More hair.
Yeah, exactly. Although it's an animal, maybe it's a little more forgiving. But yeah, there's still a lot of layers there.
No, that was a pain in the ass too.
Yeah.
So the one on the left was one of, I think I counted it. I think I'm on 20 or 21 pieces by now for Frozen Soul. Not all of them have come out. You know what I mean? I painted so many things. I'm sure some stuff will come out in like a couple of years. But this was, they had a tour shirt. They were going on a big tour. Chad of Frozen Soul contacted me. It's like, you know, what got any ideas? I've had a very long relationship with them for 3 years now, pretty much almost from the beginning of their career. Not 100%, but for a good amount of the career here. And so they're very blunt with me with what they like and don't like, but they're also very open. You know, they'll just be like, "You got any cool ideas?" And I'll be like, "How about a polar bear?" And they're like, "Yeah, that sounds dope. What about it?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's gonna have a gross tongue with a bunch of eyes." They're like, "Dope, do it." And what's funny is my wife cracks up because I draw a lot of things with tongues hanging out, and I like to paint eyes. And when she saw this, she's like, "You got to be kidding me!" And I was like, "Yeah, there we go." So this one was a lot of fun. I have with Frozen Soul, a lot of the stuff I do for them for their merch, it's a lot of blues, obviously because of ice and things, and a lot of red. So I kind of have a certain color scale that goes with all the things that I paint for them. But yeah, this one was a pain in the butt because again, it's fur. And again, from an art perspective, I was looked at a lot of things about polar bears, but polar bear fur is weird. It's very short, so you could paint it almost like skin, but put some texture in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not very good at that, and I don't think it would be as interesting. So I was like, you know what? I see from the pictures how, where, like around the eyes, where the fur is going to go in one direction, where it's going to go in the other. And I blotted out colors, and made some shades, the darker parts. And then I just went in, and again, it's layers of strands and then highlights and then more strands and highlights. It's just layer upon layer upon layer. And it again, I like this one a lot. I really like how the fur came out. The tongue's pretty cool. But for me, when I see this outside of the fur, and I'm like, oh, it actually came out pretty well. I really like how the mouth came out, because bear mouths are very difficult. If you look at them, there's a lot going on inside a bear mouth. Never want to see one up close, but there's a lot of folds in the gums and things like that. And I try to get as much of that as possible. But again, like this is another example. I knew this was going to go on a shirt, right?
Right.
And if you see it printed on their tour shirt, I think it was last year or something. Again, it's not like this. It's gonna be different. You know what I mean? And they have a style where, they have a bunch of artists that they work with, but with the paintings that I do for them, and then the person that they have do the merch does some digital stuff, and they have a style to their merch that makes them very iconic. Besides they're great musicians, obviously, but in regards to their merch, so I put in a lot of work. Could I have done it in a different way? It's because I knew it was going to be simplified for the merch, sure, but it's still my art, and I still love that piece a lot. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Nice. You still have that original sitting around?
I actually have all of Frozen Soul's paintings. I told them that I would not sell them. Cool. So if they ever want to, if they ever have the money and they want to buy them, they can. If not, they're going to stay with me. So I have a huge pile of stuff over here, but yeah, I don't sell Frozen Soul stuff.
Sick. And then
Yeah,
this one on the right, can you
yeah,
talk a little bit about it?
yeah. That was a Friday night. I'm gonna do something just for fun. So this is actually from the board game Hero Quest that I was a huge fan of as a kid and still am. They revamped it, and I play it with my kids sometimes. And there is, I forget the name of the guy, Lee something.
Les
Um,
Edwards?
that's it, not Lee, Les Edwards, yeah, who's an amazing painter. This is an iconic barbarian on the front of the Hero Quest cover, and I just want to have some fun. Every once in a while it's good because I mean I'm stacked with commissions and again busy with work, but every once in a while it's good just to draw something or paint something for fun. And I
Hmm.
wanted to draw a zombie barbarian, so I took the art, I traced it out, And by the way, for artists, there's nothing wrong with tracing stuff and using photo references. Everyone does it. Don't listen to the haters. So I traced it out, put it on, and it was like I think my wife and kids were at like my in-laws or something like that, and I had a board, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna paint it. And I actually did like a process video. I painted most of it one night, and then like the next day I finished it. So it really only took me 1 or 2 days, and it was just a lot of fun. And I was like, well, I need something for the background, so I really like the stonework that I did there. And then I did like a stupid landscape behind that took me like 5 minutes, not even. But that was a lot of fun. And then what was interesting about that was then I posted it. A lot of people liked it. People like when I paint gory stuff. God forbid I like paint a flower. No one's gonna like it. But it always happens. I don't know why. But people love the gory stuff, which is cool.
Oh,
I
I
dig
feel you,
doing it.
man.
And so I put this up, and then again, Kyle from Undeath was like, "Yo, we want to put that on a shirt." He's like, how much? I gave him a price. He's like, yo, cool, awesome. And actually, I said, can you get me? They actually came to Philly with Frozen Soul, and he's like, yo, do you want a shirt? And I was like, yeah. And I wear this around sometimes, and some people are like making fun of me, like, you're wearing your own art. I'm like, yeah, because I like it. It looks cool. And I like Undeath because I think they're amazing. They're great musicians and great guys too. But yeah, they put it on their shirt, and apparently it sold pretty well. And a lot of people were like, and what was really cool is a lot of people were like, isn't that the dude from Hero Quest? And I was like, yeah. They're like, oh, that's so awesome. I'm like, I know, right? Wasn't that original? I just, made him a zombie, and that's not hard to do, you know. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun. I really like that one a lot.
Yeah, it's sick, man. And
Yeah.
I love how you did you grounded him
Oh
on the
yeah.
black, with then there's a little bit of the dust kind of rising. You really
Totally.
feel the power of the stance then. And
Yeah.
then great choice with the archway too. So
Yeah.
really,
I
really good.
really like how I did that stonework. Yeah. Again, happy accidents.
Yeah.
Just messing around.
All right. I think this is the last one.
Oh wow.
So we got on the left side, bury them deep, and on the right, plague years.
Yeah. So bury them deep. This was an interesting one. They came to me and they're like, "Of course, we love your stuff and thank you." And they had an idea that they wanted to do what's known as a sky burial.
Okay.
And I said the interesting part about this one was before I converted to Islam years ago, years ago, I was actually a practicing Tibetan Buddhist for about a few years. Had a teacher, had a sangha. For those that know what that is. Had empowerments. And I actually knew quite a bit about sky burials because there was a lama that would come to our Tibetan group that was from Tibet and had performed sky burials. And so I kind of explained to him certain things. Like they wanted the monks to be holding like a naked dead body, and I said they don't do that. The body is still covered, and they're like, okay, so one of the monks is actually covering or holding a covered body, and they're going up to the charnel ground. And so I did say, I said, okay, well, there should be a stupa there, and that's the structure. And again, a lot of gore. They wanted 3 vultures, so that was fine. We put in the 3 vultures, and then the prayer flags were harder than it looked. There probably should be more, but they were really difficult to
Yeah.
do. You know what I mean? And we had to make sure that it's the right colors because there's a specific mantra with the colors that go along with it. So that's not just random letters. Those are actual Tibetan words that make up the mantra that would be on prayer flags. And then, of course, standard stuff. Like I said, around the edges, I try to blur it out so that the focus is on the actual stupa itself. So they were very happy with it. Certain aspects of it, I wish I could have done better, but you know, that's how it is. Yeah.
Well, it's really cool that you did like all that research and you
Mhm.
like gently gave the band kind of like a correction to have it a little
Totally.
bit more true. So I thought
And
that's really cool.
and and shout out to them because they were very receptive about it, which I love. Like they were said, look, we need to have this many vultures there, and it's like that's cool and all that. But I remember saying like, look, this is kind of how it would be, and they're like, oh, that's really awesome because any sort of authenticity would makes it go 1,000 times more. On the I think it's still there. A lot of it's covered up with gore now, but at the bottom of the stupa, there's two what's called vajras. They're lightning bolt symbols going across that would be there. Um, of course, charnel grounds don't particularly look like this, but
Yeah.
it's not like just ribs and gore and blood. But that's the fun of it. So they were big fans. They loved it, and I'm glad again executing their vision was a lot of fun.
Super sick. And then this one on the right, Plague Years.
Yeah. That one was a lot. That one was another one that was awesome. When Eric, I've done a few things for Plague Years before. Um, they had me do a couple T-shirts for them that were a lot of fun. They were really stoked on some of the stuff I could do for them, and then they were dropping an EP, and they wanted. It's actually two parts. There's a front and a back, so it's on a nice long piece. And they were really cool. They were like, we really don't have anything. We just want something that's just super death metal, super sick, and just kind of has the vibe that they think. So I had a couple ideas of things that I wanted to do, and I actually drew them up about 3 different sketches. And they were like, well, this is the one we really like, but can you add elements of this there? And I was like, that's awesome. So this obviously is the front piece. Which again to me is just it reminds me a lot of like Obituary,
Mm-hmm.
some of their covers where just look, we got a nice devil dude on the front. I love painting eyes, so anytime I can just add random freaking eyes places and it doesn't matter. It's cool. So we've got a city. For whatever reason, the bottom mouth looks like the Colony in Flames album cover. That wasn't by design. It
Huh.
just does. And I put in, because it's evil, I put in the upside down cross. And this was a lot of fun. They loved it. What's interesting about this one is in the top 2 corners, you see like there's like a landscape that originally wasn't there. It was just black, and they had come back to me months later and were like, Jared, do you mind? It looks we're playing with the album cover right now. And it's looking a little empty. Can you add something small there? And I was like, no problem. And so in like literally 2 hours, I got out some yellow ochre ink, and it was already lacquered. But that really didn't matter that much. Because again, you're making kind of like a misty kind of look, and there's some stuff in the upper right corner, like tentacle things that are also on the back cover. And then, of course, I add a little moon in there because why not? It's fun. And they're like, oh, my God, you did. That's amazing. And I'm like, guys, it's really not that big. It's not, thank you. It's not that big of a deal. What's also cool about this, besides the fact that the album rocks, I mean, this forget the artwork. Plague Years are so good. And this EP was incredible, and it's really, really cool to be able to do that. Is I think it's I'm going to get his name wrong, but the bassist from Madball,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's Jose. I could be wrong. If I got his name wrong, I apologize. But the bassist for Madball has a podcast, and they were talking about upcoming releases, and they talked about this, and they're talking about how great the music was because it is. But then he starts going about how much he loves the album cover, and he's like, man, this reminds me of like the old '90s stuff of like skulls and devils, and we thought that, and he's like, it's so badass, and that's what I was going for. And I actually contacted him, and I via DM on Instagram, I was like, thank you for saying that. I was like, that's what I was going for. I'm glad you love it. And we talked back and forth for a little bit. He's like, dude, it's really badass. It's really cool. I love that old school stuff because that's what we listened to when we were younger. And as well, because I'm a huge Madball fan. I love hardcore,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so like I'm talking to, dudes from Madball, right? Straight
Yeah.
DMS, and we're talking about skulls and stuff like that. Like, again, 16-year-old Jerry would be, floored by the fact that I'm just chatting up with the dudes from Madball about my artwork. It's not like they're going to hire me or anything because Madball doesn't have this kind of stuff or anything, but it's just kind of cool. You know what I mean? That happened. So this one I really like, and it's also cool because I can say, and one of my buddies who actually got me into hardcore 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I was like, bro, I was just talking to some of the dudes from Madball, and he was like, why? He's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, dude. They're not stomping me or anything like that. Like, they really like my artwork. And he's like, oh, that's really badass. So that was like kind of cool that I got to flex for my friend.
Yeah, that's sick. You got to talk with Hoya, man.
Hoyam, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, Hoyam. Yeah. Oh man, I feel so bad for messing up his name. So,
No, man.
but yeah, that was. I mean, again, it wasn't like we went out for coffee, but it was just cool. We got to talk a little bit about art for a little chat for about 5 minutes, and that he shouted me out on the podcast, which is really really cool. Yeah.
Super cool, man. I like to usually wrap up with this question. What's one piece of advice you would give someone who wants to create art, specifically in like the music scene?
I'll give a couple things. One is just constantly, if you're painting or if you're drawing, whatever, just constantly do it. Just keep going. Just keep doing it. Just keep going and going. The stuff I created when I first got back into art, I thought looked great. Looks like shit. You just keep going. Again, it's that persistence to get better and better till you get to that point where it's starting to look like what you're looking. In regards to the business side of doing it, there's a couple. One is always be receptive to new ideas from clients. They're artists as well, maybe from a different side, from a musical perspective, but always be open to not necessarily criticism too, but sometimes I always say this with Frozen Soul. One of the reasons why I have a decent relationship with them is they're very upfront about things they like and don't like, or things that can make the piece better. And a lot of times they're right. Be like, oh man, I got to redo this, but it looks 1,000 times better. And sometimes I'll tell them, look, I know you think this is going to look good. It's not. And they're like, you know what? You're right. So always being open, being upfront with clients, being upfront with what you can do. And I say this all the time. Don't be a dick. Going back to comic books, you will see some of the best comic book artists have very little work, and some of the most mediocre comic book artists all over the place. And if you ask why, because I have friends that are in the comic book space, they'll say they're easy to work with. They get their shit done on time, and they're not jerks. And so, yeah, maybe it's not the most iconic panel working you'll ever see, but I know my editor's not going to be up my butt because they're going to get their stuff done relatively. I mean, things happen. And they're really good to work with. They're fun to work with. And so I try to the best of my ability. I'm not perfect. There's been some things that I've done and I've said with clients that I wish I could take back, but you can't. That I try to be as friendly as possible. Also to be pretty firm on certain things. There was one that was like, look, this isn't coming together. Maybe you should go with somebody else. No hard feelings. I'm not executing this to where you want it. I'm not really liking the ideas that are coming in. I think you should find someone else. So, standing up for yourself and knowing who you are. Don't be worried that, well, man, they're going to say something bad or I'm not going to get money. It's fine. As long as you're upfront with people and you're professional and you're respectful and you're open to ideas and just being nice people. You'd be surprised. I've had very little, at least from my end, problems with clients, and hopefully they say the same, about me, that I'm usually pretty low key. I hate paperwork, but you got to do it. Make sure you get a licensing agreement and all that kind of stuff, But I would say that practice, 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 and just be good people. Be nice, but stand up for yourself. And yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Jerry. And for anybody still watching, please follow him on Instagram at Wyrmwalk. His work's awesome. He's posting stuff all the time, and buy the merch that he basically produces for the bands. I mean,
please do. Yeah, they need the money. Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Everybody, thank you for watching. There'll be another episode just like usual, and thank you so much, Jerry. Just hang out in the dugout just for a second. All right, see you guys.